I am Catherine Mills, 28 years old, and a Major General in the United States Army. Tonight is my father's retirement dinner, and I am sitting at the back table in simple civilian clothes while he works the room. Dad has never respected my military career, always believing I would amount to nothing. He thinks I am just a low-ranking soldier wasting my potential. Tonight, that misconception will shatter in the most public way possible. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment telling me where you are from, and hit that subscribe button to join me on this journey of standing up for yourself, even when the person putting you down is family. Growing up in the Mills household was like living in a constant competition, where I was never allowed to win. My father, Richard Mills, was a high-powered executive at Defense Tech, one of the largest defense contractors in the country. He wore his success like armor, his designer suits, and commanding presence, making it clear to everyone that he was someone important. Dad had a vision for his children, at least for his sons. My brothers James and Michael received every advantage: private tutoring, prestigious internships, introductions to powerful connections. Dad mapped out their lives with meticulous precision, grooming them to follow in his footsteps. James became an investment banker, and Michael took a position at Dad's company, carefully climbing the corporate ladder under our father's watchful eye. For me, though, Dad's vision was decidedly less ambitious. "Catherine will marry well," he would tell his colleagues at company functions, while I stood nearby, cheeks burning with humiliation. "She will make some lucky man a wonderful wife someday." This was his version of praise for his only daughter. My mother, Elizabeth, tried to mitigate Dad's dismissive attitude. "Your father just wants what is best for you," she would whisper. After particularly painful dinners where Dad spent the entire time interrogating my brothers about their career prospects while ignoring me completely. He grew up in a different time. But I knew the truth. It was not about the era my father grew up in. It was about his fundamental belief that women, particularly his daughter, did not belong in positions of power. Even when I excelled academically, graduating at the top of my class, Dad found ways to diminish my achievements. "That is nice, Catherine," he said after my high school valedictorian speech, "but academia is not the real world. We will see how you fare when things get truly challenging." The military was never part of my father's plan for me. When I announced my intention to attend West Point, he laughed outright. "The military? Who would not last a week in basic training? You have always been too sensitive." I went anyway, and I did not just survive basic training, I thrived. The structure, the discipline, the clear chain of command, it all made sense to me in a way that my father's corporate politics never had. For the first time, I was judged solely on my merits, not on my gender. My rise through the ranks was swift and unprecedented. By 25, I had already achieved the rank of lieutenant colonel, having distinguished myself in strategic planning operations that saved countless lives. My commanding officers recognized my talent for logistics and crisis management, and I was given increasingly important assignments. At 28, I became one of the youngest major generals in modern military history, overseeing operations that I could not discuss even with my closest friends outside the military. Through it all, I kept my success hidden from my family. It was a decision born partly from a desire to prove myself on my own terms, and partly from the painful recognition that no achievement would ever be enough for my father. My official military records were classified, which made it easy to maintain the fiction that I was just another soldier, nothing special. My brothers, caught in our father's orbit, adopted his dismissive attitude toward my career. "Playing soldier," James called it when we gathered for holiday dinners. Michael was slightly kinder, but no more understanding. "You know, Dad just wants you to live up to your potential," he would say, as if commanding troops and making life or death decisions somehow fell short of that potential. Over the years, I made sporadic attempts to repair my relationship with my father. I attended family functions when my duties allowed, listened to his stories about corporate triumphs, and tried to find common ground. But every conversation inevitably circled back to his disappointment in my choices. You could have been something at Defense Tech, he said during our last Christmas together. I could have opened doors for you. I have opened my own doors, Dad, I replied, biting back the urge to tell him just how many doors I had opened, and how many lives depended on the decisions I made every day. He shook his head. Military service is admirable, Catherine, but you are not exactly changing the world as a low-level officer. I let him believe what he wanted to believe. Sometimes I told myself it was easier this way. If he knew the truth, he would find some way to take credit or diminish my accomplishments. Better to keep my success private than to have it twisted into something that fit his narrative. When the invitation arrived for his retirement dinner, my first instinct was to decline. Why subject myself to another evening of subtle jabs and dismissive comments? But my mother called pleading with me to attend. It would mean so much to him, even if he does not show it, she said. And to me. Please, Catherine. So I requested leave, pressed my civilian clothes, and prepared myself mentally for an evening of pretending that my father's opinion still had the power to hurt me. I knew it would be challenging, but I had faced worse. Much worse. What I did not anticipate was that this evening would change everything between us in ways that neither of us could have predicted. The grand ballroom at the Westfield Hotel gleamed with understated elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over white-clothed tables adorned with arrangements of blue hydrangeas and white roses. A small orchestra played classical music in the corner, providing a sophisticated soundtrack to the mingling of Defense Tech executives and their spouses. This was exactly the kind of refined corporate event my father had always loved, a perfect stage for him to receive the adulation he felt he deserved after 30 years of service to the company. I arrived deliberately late, slipping into the ballroom after most guests were already engaged in conversation. My simple black dress and minimal jewelry were a stark contrast to the designer outfits and diamonds that adorned most of the women present. I had chosen my attire carefully professional, but understated. Tonight was not about drawing attention to myself. Catherine, you made it? My mother spotted me immediately breaking away from a group of women to embrace me. She looked beautiful in a midnight blue gown, though the strain of organizing the perfect send-off for my father showed in the tight lines around her eyes. I promised I would come, I replied, returning her hug. How is everything going? Your father is in his element, she said, gesturing toward the center of the room where Dad stood, surrounded by admiring colleagues. He has been waiting for Harold Thompson to arrive. You know, the CEO. Apparently he rarely attends these functions, but he made an exception for your father. I nodded, feeling a flutter of unease. Harold Thompson was not just the CEO of Defense Tech, he was also a 4-star general before transitioning to the private sector. We had met several times in my professional capacity, though always in uniform and in secure facilities. I doubted he would recognize me in this setting in civilian clothes, but the possibility added an unexpected complication to the evening. Your brothers are already here, Mom continued, guiding me through the crowd. They both brought their spouses. James and Michael had indeed arrived in full force. James with his wife Amanda, both looking like they had stepped out of a luxury magazine, in matching designer wear, and Michael with his husband David, who worked as a successful architect. They stood near our father, laughing at something he said. The perfect picture of corporate family success. Katie Michael spotted me first using the childhood nickname I had long outgrown. We did not think you would make it. Military gave you the night off, James added with a smirk, glancing at my simple attire. No uniform tonight. We are not required to wear uniforms to family functions, I said, evenly accepting his brief perfunctory hug. Dad has been practicing his speech all week. Michael informed me his tone suggesting I should be impressed by this dedication. The CEO is going to present him with some kind of lifetime achievement award. That is wonderful, I said, searching for genuine enthusiasm. Despite everything, part of me still wanted to be happy for my father. He had worked hard throughout his career, even if his ambition had come at the cost of our relationship. Catherine. My father had noticed our little group and made his way over, accepting congratulations and well wishes as he moved through the crowd. He looked distinguished in his tailored tuxedo, his silver hair perfectly styled. "I am surprised you could get leave for something as trivial as your old man's retirement." The jab was delivered with a smile, making it seem like good-natured teasing to anyone listening. Only our family would recognize the dismissal underneath. "I would not miss it, Dad," I replied, matching his public smile. "Congratulations on your retirement." He nodded, accepting my words as his due. "You remember Patricia from accounting. Her son is a lieutenant now. Perhaps you know him. Lieutenant Robert Jackson." This was another of my father's habits, assuming that I personally knew every member of the military, as if we were all part of some small social club, rather than an organization of over 1 million active personnel. "I do not believe I have had the pleasure," I said diplomatically. "Well, I am sure he outranks you by now anyway," Dad said with a laugh, clapping me on the shoulder before turning away to greet a more important guest. I made my way to my assigned table at the back of the room, as far from the head table as possible, without actually being in the kitchen. The seating arrangement spoke volumes about my place in the family hierarchy. James and Michael with their spouses were seated at the head table with Mom and Dad. I was placed with distant relatives and a few junior employees who looked uncomfortable to be seated with the boss's daughter. "Catherine Mills, is that you?" A warm voice pulled me from my thoughts. I looked up to see Clara Wilson, my mother's oldest friend, and one of the few people who had consistently shown interest in my life and career. "Aunt Clara," I said, standing to hug her. She was not actually my aunt, but she had been such a constant presence throughout my childhood that the honorary title felt natural. "I did not know you would be here." "Your mother insisted," she said, taking the seat beside me. "And I would not miss seeing Richard try to be humble for an entire evening. It promises to be quite the performance." I laughed, despite myself. Clara had always seen through my father's carefully constructed image. "You look well," she said, studying my face. "The military agrees with you, I think, more than Richard would care to admit." "It has been a good fit," I acknowledged cautiously. "Better than he knows, I suspect," Clara said with a knowing look. "I have a nephew in the Pentagon. He speaks very highly of a certain young female officer who has been making quite a name for herself." Before I could respond, the clinking of a glass interrupted our conversation. The CEO had arrived, and the formal part of the evening was about to begin. Throughout the cocktail hour, I had watched my father work the room like the corporate politician. He was shaking hands, laughing at the right moments, accepting congratulations with practiced humility. Not once did he come back to speak with me, or introduce me to any of his colleagues. It was as if, having acknowledged my presence, he could now comfortably ignore me for the remainder of the evening. My mother made periodic visits to my table, clearly torn between her duties as hostess and her desire to make me feel included. "Your father is just nervous about his speech," she explained during one such visit. "You know how important this night is to him." I did know. This retirement dinner represented the culmination of everything my father had worked for: recognition, respect, admiration from his peers. What I did not yet realize was that it would also become the night that forced him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about his only daughter. The dinner portion of the evening progressed with the mechanical precision of all corporate functions. Salads were served and cleared, followed by perfectly cooked steaks or delicately prepared fish, depending on one's preference, indicated weeks in advance. Wine flowed freely, loosening ties and tongues as the evening progressed. By the time dessert plates were being removed, a comfortable buzz of conversation filled the ballroom. Harold Thompson, the CEO of Defense Tech and former four-star general, rose to begin the formal presentations. He cut an imposing figure even in a tuxedo, tall, broad-shouldered, with the erect posture that never quite leaves military men. I slumped slightly in my chair, angling my face away. I had briefed the general several times during classified operations, and while I doubted he would recognize me out of uniform and context, I preferred not to take chances. Ladies and gentlemen, Thompson began, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room without the need for a microphone. We are gathered here tonight to honor an extraordinary man, a visionary leader, who has helped shape defense tech into the company it is today. What followed was a 15-minute tribute to my father's career accomplishments, his strategic insights, his mentorship of younger executives, and his unwavering dedication to the company's mission. Thompson spoke with genuine admiration, and I found myself listening intently, seeing a side of my father I rarely witnessed at home, the respected professional, the admired leader. And now, Thompson concluded, I would like to invite Richard Mills to say a few words and accept this token of our appreciation for his 30 years of exceptional service. The room erupted in applause as my father approached the podium. He embraced Thompson, accepted a crystal plaque, and turned to face the audience with the confidence of a man accustomed to commanding attention. Thank you, Harold, for those incredibly kind words, Dad began. And thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate not just my retirement, but the extraordinary journey we have shared at Defense Tech. His speech began with appropriate humility, acknowledging mentors who had guided him, colleagues who had challenged him, and the company that had provided him with opportunities to grow. He spoke well, as he always did, striking the perfect balance between pride in his accomplishments and recognition of those who had helped him along the way. But no career, however, successful, can be truly fulfilling without the support of family, he continued, his voice softening. I have been blessed beyond measure in that regard. He turned toward my mother seated at the head table. Elizabeth, my wife of 35 years. The woman who has stood beside me through every triumph and setback, who has created a home filled with love and warmth, who has been my North Star through all the chaos of corporate life. I could not have done any of this without you. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin as the room applauded. I found myself blinking back unexpected tears. Their relationship had always seemed solid, even if I sometimes questioned my mother's willingness to accept Dad's traditional views on gender roles. And my son's dad continued gesturing toward James and Michael. James, who has made his mark in the financial world, showing the same drive and determination that I like to think he inherited from me. And Michael, who chose to join Defense Tech and has already proven himself an asset to this company, rising on his own merits, despite the challenge of having his father's shadow looming over him. More applause, more proud smiles. My brothers basked in the public acknowledgement of their achievements, their spouses beaming beside them. I knew what was coming next. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind during the drive to the hotel, the brief perfunctory mention of his daughter, the military service, acknowledged with minimal enthusiasm, perhaps a gentle joke about my choice of career being so different from the family business. I had prepared myself to smile politely, to accept the crumbs of recognition with grace. What I had not prepared for was the public humiliation that followed. I am proud to have such talented children, my father said, surveying the room with satisfaction. Then his gaze fell on me and something shifted in his expression. Perhaps it was the wine, perhaps the intoxication of being the center of attention, or perhaps simply decades of disappointment seeking an outlet. Whatever the cause, what came next changed everything. Well, most of them anyway, he added, attempting a jovial tone that did not quite mask the derision underneath. My daughter Catherine chose a different path. Military service. Admirable in theory, of course. The room grew quiet, sensing the shift in atmosphere. She is here somewhere, Dad continued, scanning the tables until he spotted me. Ah, there she is. Catherine, stand up so everyone can see you. Trapped. I rose slowly, keeping my expression neutral, despite the churning in my stomach. Catherine joined the army several years ago, Dad announced to the room, some sort of low-ranked position. What are you now, Catherine? A corporal, a sergeant. I prefer not to discuss rank at civilian functions, Dad. I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. He waved a dismissive hand, always so secretive about her unimpressive military career. as if anyone here would understand or care about the difference between all those insignias and patches. Uncomfortable laughter rippled through the room. I remained standing, my face burning, but my posture military straight. "You know," Catherine Dad continued, apparently emboldened by the laughter, "perhaps it would be better if you stepped out before the classified portion of the evening begins. Would not want you to embarrass yourself trying to understand the complex defense contracts we will be discussing. After all, following orders is one thing, but strategic thinking is quite another." The room fell completely silent. My mother's face had drained of color. Even my brothers looked uncomfortable with the public nature of the attack. I stood frozen, years of military discipline keeping me upright when all I wanted was to disappear. "Richard," my mother finally said, her voice carrying in the silence, "that is enough." Dad seemed to realize he had crossed a line. He cleared his throat. "Just a bit of family humor," he said unconvincingly. "Catherine knows I respect her choices even if they are unconventional for a Mills." I did not know that at all, but this was neither the time nor place to correct him. I gathered my purse from the table. "If you will excuse me," I said quietly, addressing no one in particular, "I think I will get some air." I began walking toward the exit head, held high, focusing on maintaining my dignity when everything in me wanted to run. The click of my heels against the marble floor echoed in the uncomfortable silence. I had nearly reached the door when a commanding voice stopped me in my tracks. "Wait just a moment." Harold Thompson, CEO of Defense Tech and former four-star general, had stepped away from the head table and was looking at me with narrowed eyes. "Miss Mills," he said, studying my face intently, "we have met before, have we not?" I turned slowly to face him, acutely aware that every eye in the room was now fixed on this unexpected interaction. "Yes, sir," I acknowledged. "We have." Thompson took a step closer, recognition dawning in his eyes. "You are not, good Lord, you are not Major General Catherine Mills, are you? Commander of the Joint Strategic Operations Task Force." A collective gasp rippled through the room. At the podium, my father's face had gone completely white. The microphone slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a thunderous boom that reverberated through the silent ballroom. The microphone feedback pierced the silence, a high-pitched whine that seemed to underscore the shock rippling through the ballroom. General Thompson, because, despite his current role as CEO, that military bearing never leaves you, stood before me, his expression transitioning from confusion to certainty. "It is you," he confirmed, not waiting for my response. "Major General Catherine Mills. I did not recognize you out of uniform." I maintained my composure, years of crisis management training kicking in automatically. "Yes, sir. It is good to see you again." My father remained frozen at the podium, his mouth slightly open, the abandoned microphone at his feet. The perfect corporate image he had cultivated throughout his career had cracked, completely revealing the stunned man beneath. Thompson turned to address the room, his authoritative voice carrying to every corner without effort. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have the unexpected honor of informing you that we have a true military hero in our midst tonight. Major General Catherine Mills is one of the youngest generals in modern United States military history, and the commander of operations, so classified, I cannot name them in this room." Another wave of murmurs swept through the audience. I could see my brothers exchanging bewildered glances, trying to reconcile this information with their understanding of their underachieving sister. General Mills Thompson continued, emphasizing, "My rank has been instrumental in developing strategic initiatives that have quite literally changed the course of modern warfare. Her logistics innovations during Operation Northern Shield saved countless American lives. Her leadership during the Caspian crisis averted what could have been a catastrophic international incident." Each revelation landed like a physical blow on my father, who had finally managed to retrieve the microphone but seemed unable to form words. My mother had risen from her seat, one hand pressed to her mouth, tears forming in her eyes. Whether from shock, pride, or a complex mixture of both, I could not tell. Thompson turned back to me, extending his hand. "It is an honor to see you again, General. Though I must admit this is the last place I expected to encounter you." I shook his hand firmly. "Richard Mills is my father, sir." "Your father?" Thompson looked genuinely surprised, glancing between me and the man, still standing shell-shocked at the podium. "I had no idea. He never mentioned." "It was not common knowledge," I explained, keeping my voice even. "I prefer to keep my professional and personal lives separate." By now, several other attendees had risen from their seats. A woman in an Air Force uniform, Colonel Jessica Rivera, whom I had worked with on joint operations, approached with a respectful nod. "General Mills," she acknowledged. "I did not realize you would be here tonight." "Family obligation," I replied simply. More military personnel in attendance began making their way toward me, 3 officers from different branches who had served under my command, a Pentagon official who had sat across from me in high-level briefings. In an ironic twist, my father's retirement dinner was rapidly transforming into an impromptu military gathering with me at its center. The balance of power in the room had shifted dramatically. My father, who had commanded the attention and respect of everyone present just minutes earlier now, stood forgotten at the podium. All eyes were on me, the daughter he had just publicly dismissed as a low-ranking soldier not worth the room's attention. My mother finally made her way through the crowd, reaching for my hands with trembling fingers. "Catherine," she whispered, "why did you never tell us?" "It never seemed relevant, Mom," I said softly. "My work speaks for itself. I did not need family recognition to validate it." The unspoken implication hung between us. I had not told them because I knew my father would never truly appreciate my achievements, would find some way to diminish them or claim credit for them. Mom's eyes reflected understanding and regret. James and Michael approached next, their expressions, a study in conflicting emotions, shock, confusion, embarrassment, and dawning respect. Major General James repeated incredulously, "That is... what? 2 stars." "Yes," I confirmed. "How long?" Michael asked. "How long have you been a general?" "I received my first star at 26, I said. "The second came last year." 26. James looked stunned. "That is that normal?" "No," Colonel Rivera interjected. "It is unprecedented in modern military history. Your sister is something of a legend at the Pentagon." I could see them struggling to reconcile this information with the narrative they had built around me, their underachieving sister, who had chosen a path of following orders rather than leading, who had settled for less than she could have been. That narrative was crumbling before their eyes. Throughout this exchange, my father had remained at the podium watching as his carefully orchestrated evening disintegrated around him. Finally, he seemed to remember his role as the evening's honoree. He cleared his throat, the sound amplified by the microphone he had recovered. "I think," he said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain, "we should continue with the evening's program. There is still the matter of the award presentation." But no one was listening anymore. The crowd had reorganized itself around me, military personnel, introducing themselves to those who knew me only as Richard's daughter, corporate executives, who had barely acknowledged me earlier, now clamoring for introductions. Thompson turned back to my father with a bemused expression. "I think, Richard, that the evening has taken an unexpected turn. Perhaps you would like to revise your earlier comments about your daughter's service." The challenge in his tone was unmistakable. My father flushed, the color rising from his collar to his hairline. For perhaps the first time in his professional life, Richard Mills found himself humiliated in front of his peers, experiencing exactly what he had just inflicted on me. Of course," Dad stammered. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding. I was not aware of Catherine's position." A Major General Thompson corrected pointedly. "Commanding strategic operations that have shaped national security policy. Not the sort of thing one typically overlooks in one's own child." The rebuke was delivered with military precision, and my father had no defense against it. He nodded mutely, finally stepping away from the podium and rejoining my mother, who gave him a look that promised a lengthy conversation later. For my part, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, vindication certainly, but also discomfort at being the center of this unplanned revelation. I had never sought public recognition for my work. Much of what I did required discretion and anonymity. Now, in the most awkward way possible, my two worlds had collided, and I was left to navigate the aftermath. "If you will excuse me," I said, finally addressing the group that had gathered around me. "I think I will step outside for a moment." Thompson nodded, understanding. "Of course, General. We have disrupted your evening enough." As I made my way toward the terrace doors, I passed close to my father. Our eyes met briefly, his stunned and uncertain mind steady. In that moment, I saw something I had never seen in his gaze before, when he looked at me, respect, tinged with fear. It was not the relationship I had wanted with my father, but it was perhaps the beginning of something new. The cool night air was a welcome relief after the stifling tension of the ballroom. The hotel's terrace overlooked a carefully manicured garden, the pathways lit by soft landscape lighting. I leaned against the stone balustrade, taking deep breaths and trying to process the events of the last 15 minutes. My entire relationship with my family had just been irrevocably altered. The carefully maintained separation between my professional and personal lives had collapsed in the most public and dramatic way possible. There would be no going back to the status quo, no more family dinners where my career was dismissed as an unfortunate phase, no more condescending comments about my playing soldier while my brothers did important work. The terrace door opened behind me. I straightened automatically, expecting my mother, or perhaps one of my brothers. Instead, it was Colonel Rivera, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "Thought you might need this, General," she said, offering me one of the glasses. "That was quite a scene in there." I accepted the champagne with a grateful nod. Not exactly how I planned to spend my evening. Rivera leaned against the balustrade beside me. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am." "We are at a civilian function, Jessica. You can drop the formalities." "Right." She took a sip of her champagne. "So your father had no idea?" "None of them did." "No," I confirmed. "It seemed simpler that way." "Simpler," she repeated, giving me a skeptical look. "With all due respect, Catherine, there is nothing simple about hiding the fact that you are one of the youngest major generals in American history from your own family." I shrugged, not ready to delve into the complicated family dynamics that had led to my decision. "What is happening in there now?" "General Thompson is regaling everyone with stories of your strategic brilliance during the Caspian crisis. Your father looks like he might pass out. Your mother is alternating between crying and looking fiercely proud. And your brothers are doing that thing men do when they realize a woman they have underestimated is actually vastly more accomplished than they are." "Sounds delightful," I said dryly. "Perhaps I should stay out here all night." "You could," Rivera acknowledged. "But then you would be doing exactly what your father suggested, leaving before you embarrass him." She had a point. Running away now, regardless of how justified, would only reinforce the narrative my father had tried to create. I had never backed down from a challenge in my professional life. I should not start now just because the battlefield was personal rather than strategic. The terrace door opened again, and this time, it was my mother who emerged. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry, her posture straight, despite the emotional upheaval of the evening. "Colonel Rivera," she acknowledged with a nod. "Would you mind if I spoke with my daughter privately?" "Of course not, ma'am." Rivera straightened, years of military discipline kicking in automatically in response to a maternal authority figure. "General, I will see you inside." When we were alone, my mother and I stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you keep something like this from us? From me?" "Would it have made a difference, Mom?" I countered gently. "Would Dad have seen me differently if he knew I commanded troops rather than just being one of them?" Or would he have found some other reason why my accomplishments did not measure up? Mom flinched as if I had struck her. "That is not fair, Catherine." "Is it not?" I sighed, softening my tone. "Look at what just happened in there. My entire adult life I have listened to. Dad dismissed my career choices. Not once did he ask for details about my service. Not once did he express genuine interest in what I actually do. He was content with his assumption that I was just another soldier following orders but not giving them because that fit his perception of me." "He is proud of you," Mom insisted, though her tone lacked conviction. "He just has trouble showing it." "He is proud of who he thinks I should be, not who I actually am," I corrected. "And he had no trouble showing his pride in James and Michael tonight." Mom did not argue the point, which was answer enough. Instead, she reached out to touch my arm. "I should have asked more questions. I should have pushed harder to understand your work." "Yes," I agreed simply. "You should have." Tears welled in her eyes again, but she blinked them back. "Your father is in shock. I have never seen him like this." "I imagine not," I said. "It is probably the first time in his professional life that he has been publicly corrected and embarrassed in front of his peers." "He wants to speak with you," Mom said, "before he faces everyone again." I weighed my options. Part of me wanted to refuse to let him stew in the consequences of his actions, but that would be petty, and whatever else I might be, pettiness had never been among my flaws. "Where is he?" "In the hotel manager's office. They gave us the space for a few minutes of privacy." I nodded. "I will talk to him. But Mom, this does not fix everything. One conversation cannot undo years of dismissal and disrespect." "I know," she said softly. "But it could be a start." We returned to the ballroom, which had partially resumed its normal function. The orchestra was playing again, though no one was dancing. Small groups had formed throughout the space, and I could hear my name being mentioned in several conversations. General Thompson and my brothers were engaged in what appeared to be an intense discussion at the far end of the room. As we crossed toward the exit, several people approached to offer congratulations or express their surprise at the evening's revelations. I responded with the practiced diplomacy that had served me well in military and political circles, neither accepting blame for the misunderstanding nor casting it onto my father. The hotel manager was waiting to escort us to the office where my father had retreated. He led us down a service corridor away from the curious eyes of the party guests and gestured to a door at the end of the hallway. "Take as much time as you need," he said. "I have instructed the staff not to disturb you." Mom squeezed my hand. "Do you want me to come in with you?" I shook my head. "I think this needs to be between Dad and me." She nodded, understanding. "I will wait out here." Taking a deep breath, I knocked once on the door, and then entered without waiting for a response. My father was standing at the window, his back to the door, still holding the crystal retirement plaque that now seemed like a relic from a different evening entirely. "Dad," I said, closing the door behind me, "Mom said you wanted to speak with me." He turned slowly, and I was struck by how much older he suddenly looked. The confident corporate executive had vanished, replaced by a man confronting the realization that he had fundamentally misunderstood a critical aspect of his own child's life. "Catherine," he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued, "I did not know." It was as close to an apology as I had ever heard from him. "You never asked," I replied simply. He placed the plaque on the desk with exaggerated care. "Would you have told me if I had—" I considered the question honestly. I do not know. Probably not at first. But eventually, yes, I think I would have if I had felt you were genuinely interested, rather than just looking for ammunition to compare me unfavorably to James and Michael. He flinched but did not deny the accusation. "Major General," he said, testing the words, "that is significant." "Yes," I agreed, "it is." "And you achieved this entirely on your own merit." It was not quite a question, but I could hear the unspoken one beneath it. Did you use the mill's name to advance your career? My service record is classified, I told him. But yes, it was entirely on merit. In fact, I deliberately avoided mentioning any connection to defense tech, or to you specifically, to prevent any perception of favoritism or conflict of interest. He nodded, slowly absorbing this. Your mother tells me that General Thompson considers you something of a prodigy in strategic operations. General Thompson is generous in his assessment, I said diplomatically. Is he? Dad looked at me directly for perhaps the first time that evening. He does not strike me as a man given to exaggeration or unnecessary praise. No, I acknowledged. He is not. A heavy silence fell between us. I could see my father struggling to reconcile his long-held image of me with the reality that had been revealed tonight. It was a painful process to witness, but a necessary one. I do not know what to say, he finally admitted. Congratulations seems inadequate, and an apology would be a start, I finished for him. He drew himself up slightly, corporate pride reasserting itself. I was wrong about your career, he conceded. I made assumptions that were incorrect. It was not the full apology I deserved, but it was more than I had ever expected to receive from him. Yes, I said. You did. Another silence, less heavy this time. We should return to the party, he said eventually. I have a retirement to celebrate, apparently alongside my daughter's previously unknown military accomplishments. The attempt at humor fell flat, but I appreciated the effort. Yes, we should go back. And Dad. Yes. When we do, please do not try to take credit for my career, or suggest that growing up as your daughter somehow prepared me for military leadership. My achievements are my own. A flash of the old defensiveness crossed his face, then faded into reluctant acceptance. Understood, he said, and for the first time in our relationship, he actually seemed to mean it. The remainder of the retirement dinner proceeded with a strained cordiality. My father, ever the corporate politician, managed to recover some of his composure, delivering abbreviated closing remarks that thanked everyone for their attendance, and acknowledged the unexpected revelations of the evening with as much grace as he could muster. He did not attempt to explain or excuse his earlier comments about my service, which was perhaps the wisest choice under the circumstances. General Thompson insisted that I join the head table for the final portion of the evening, a gesture that was equal parts honor and subtle rebuke to my father. I accepted with the diplomatic poise that had served me well in tense international negotiations, taking the seat beside my mother, while my father occupied the other side. You handled that beautifully, Mom whispered as dessert was served. I am so proud of you, Catherine. I always have been, but now. Thank you, I said, covering her hand with mine briefly. That means a lot. Throughout dessert and coffee, I was approached by a steady stream of my father's colleagues, all suddenly eager to make my acquaintance. I answered their questions about my career with practiced discretion, neither revealing classified information nor shutting down the conversations entirely. My brothers watched these interactions from a distance, their expressions still cycling through various stages of shock and reassessment. By the time the evening officially concluded, it was nearly midnight. The crowd had thinned considerably, with only family members and a few close friends remaining. As the hotel staff began clearing tables and the orchestra packed up their instruments, my father approached me directly for the first time since our brief conversation in the manager's office. Your mother and I would like to invite you back to the house, he said formally, as if extending a business invitation rather than addressing his daughter. James and Michael will be joining us. I think we have much to discuss. I hesitated. The emotional toll of the evening had been considerable, and the thought of extending it with what promised to be an intense family confrontation was not appealing. But avoiding difficult conversations had never been my style in either my professional or personal life. All right, I agreed. I will follow you there. The drive to my parents' suburban home took 30 minutes, a silent journey that gave me time to collect my thoughts and prepare for what was to come. I had spent years compartmentalizing my family relationships and my military career. Now that those compartments had collapsed into each other, I needed to establish new boundaries and expectations. The house was exactly as I remembered it, a sprawling colonial that my father had purchased when his career at defense tech had first taken off. I had not been inside for over a year, though I had driven past it occasionally when duties brought me to the area, a strange ritual that I had never fully examined. Mom led everyone into the formal living room, a space typically reserved for entertaining important guests, rather than family discussions. The choice of venue underscored the unusual nature of the gathering. My brothers and their spouses settled onto one of the sofas, while my parents took their usual chairs. I remained standing, a military habit, in uncertain situations. "Please sit, Catherine," my mother said, gesturing to an empty armchair. "I prefer to stand, thank you," I replied, then softened my tone at her disappointed expression. "At least for now." My father cleared his throat, drawing all attention to himself, another lifelong habit. "I think we need to address what happened tonight," he began. "There has clearly been a miscommunication about Catherine's military service." "Miscommunication," James repeated incredulously. "Dad, you humiliated Katie in front of everyone, and then it turned out she is basically the military equivalent of a corporate CEO. That is a bit more than a miscommunication." I felt a surprising surge of gratitude toward my brother. Perhaps he was not as firmly in our father's orbit as I had assumed. "I was not aware of Catherine's rank," Dad said stiffly. "She chose not to share that information with the family." "And why do you think that is, Richard?" My mother's voice had an edge I had rarely heard her use with my father. Why would our daughter feel the need to hide her extraordinary accomplishments from her own family? The directness of the question seemed to catch my father off guard. He looked at me, genuine confusion in his expression. "I do not know," he admitted. "Catherine, why did you keep this from us?" I took a moment to organize my thoughts, determined to be honest, but not needlessly cruel. "I kept it from you because I knew that no matter what I achieved, it would never be enough to change your fundamental perception of me as somehow less capable, less accomplished than my brothers. And I did not want to subject my military career, which I have built entirely on my own merits, to the same dismissive judgment you have applied to every other aspect of my life." The room fell silent. My mother's eyes filled with tears, though whether from sorrow at the truth of my words or relief at their finally being spoken, I could not tell. "That is not fair," my father protested. But the argument sounded hollow even to his own ears. "I have always supported all my children equally." "No, Dad, you have not," Michael interjected, surprising me again. "You have always had different standards for Katie than for James and me. Lower expectations, but also less genuine interest. We all saw it." "And none of you said anything," Dad looked around the room accusingly. "I did," Mom said quietly. "Many times. You always dismissed my concerns, said I was being oversensitive, that Catherine needed to toughen up if she was going to make it in the real world. Which is ironic," James added, "considering she has apparently been making life or death decisions in actual combat zones, while I have been pushing papers on Wall Street, and Michael has been attending corporate retreats." My father looked genuinely taken aback by the unified front he suddenly faced. "I never meant to. That is, I always wanted the best for all my children." "The best, according to your definition," I pointed out, "not according to our own talents and interests." Dad fell silent, absorbing this. My mother took advantage of the pause to stand and approach me, taking my hands in hers. "Catherine, I owe you an apology," she said, her voice steady, despite the tears in her eyes. "I should have done more to support your choices, to insist that your father respect your path even if it was not the one he would have chosen for you. I failed you in that regard, and I am deeply sorry." Her sincerity was unmistakable, and I felt something tight within my chest begin to loosen. "Thank you, Mom," I said softly. "That means a great deal to me." My father watched this exchange with an unreadable expression. When Mom returned to her seat, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, a posture I had rarely seen from him, less formal and controlled than his usual bearing. "Why, the military," Catherine?" he asked, and for perhaps the first time it seemed like a genuine question rather than a prelude to criticism. "With your intelligence, your strategic thinking, you could have written your own ticket in the corporate world. Why choose a path that would separate you so completely from the family business?" It was the question he should have asked years ago when I first announced my intention to attend West Point. Better late than never, I supposed. "Because, in the military, I am judged solely on my merits," I explained. "My gender is secondary to my capabilities. My family name carries no weight. Every promotion, every commendation, every responsibility I have been given has been earned through my own efforts and abilities." I paused, considering how much to reveal. "And because the work matters, Dad. Not in the sense of corporate profits or market share, but in terms of human lives and national security. When I make the right decision, people come home to their families. When I develop a successful strategy, conflicts are resolved with minimal casualties. There is a clarity of purpose in that which I never found in the corporate exercises you brought me to as a teenager." My father nodded slowly, seeming to truly consider my words. "I never looked at it that way," he admitted. "To me, the military always seemed like a rigid hierarchy where individual talent was subjugated to the chain of command." "It is a hierarchy," I acknowledged, "but one based on demonstrated capability, rather than political maneuvering or family connections. There is freedom in that kind of structure, at least for me." "Major General," my father said again, still seeming to test the reality of the title. "At your age. That is remarkable." "Yes," I agreed simply. "It is. And yet, you never wanted us to know." It was not quite a question, but the hurt underlying it was real. "I never thought you would understand its significance," I said honestly, "or that, if you did, you would find some way to diminish it, or relate it back to your own influence." He flinched but did not deny the accusation. "Perhaps you were right about that," he conceded. "But I would like to think I am capable of learning of, reassessing my perspectives." "I would like to think that too," I said. My brothers exchanged glances, seemingly uncertain about their role in this unfolding family drama. It was James who finally spoke, addressing me directly. "So what happens now, Katie? With us, I mean. Do we just pretend tonight never happened, and go back to our usual holiday gatherings where no one talks about anything real?" I considered the question seriously. "I do not think we can go back," I said after a moment. "Too much has been revealed. But we can go forward, if we are willing to establish new patterns of interaction based on mutual respect rather than outdated family dynamics." "What would that look like?" Michael asked. "Practically speaking." "It would mean acknowledging that we are all adults with our own paths and accomplishments," I said. "It would mean genuine interest in each other's lives, and work without constant comparisons or hierarchies of value. It would mean respecting boundaries and confidentiality when necessary. And it would mean addressing problems directly when they arise, rather than letting resentments build over years." My mother nodded approval. "That sounds healthy and long overdue." My father remained silent for a long moment, and I could see him struggling with concepts that challenged the foundation of how he had always operated in both his professional and family life. Finally, he rose from his chair and approached me, stopping at a respectful distance. "Catherine," he said formally, "I owe you an apology, a real one, not the qualified acknowledgement I offered earlier. I have been wrong in how I have treated you, in the assumptions I have made about your capabilities and achievements. I let my own preconceptions blind me to the extraordinary person you have become. I am sorry for that, and I would like the opportunity to do better going forward." It was perhaps the most honest thing he had ever said to me. I studied his face, looking for signs of the usual performative sincerity he employed in business situations, but found only genuine regret and uncertainty. "Thank you, Dad," I said finally. "I appreciate that. And yes, I would like that opportunity as well." He extended his hand, a businesslike gesture that nonetheless represented a significant shift in how he saw me, as an equal deserving of respect, rather than a daughter to be directed and judged. I took it, completing the formal agreement between us. It was just a beginning, I knew. One conversation, no matter how honest, could not undo decades of established patterns. But it was a beginning I had stopped hoping for long ago, and for tonight that was enough. 3 months after my father's retirement dinner, I stood in full dress uniform at the center of a ceremony marking my promotion to Lieutenant General. The third star represented not just increased responsibility, but recognition of successful leadership during a particularly challenging international security crisis that had unfolded in the weeks following Dad's retirement. Unlike previous promotions which I had celebrated quietly with fellow officers and a few close friends, this ceremony included my entire family. My mother sat in the front row, elegant in a navy blue suit, her eyes shining with undisguised pride. Beside her, looking somewhat out of place but determinedly present, was my father, wearing his best corporate attire as if attending an important board meeting. James and Michael had both taken time away from their busy careers to attend, bringing their spouses, and in James's case, his 2 young children, who were fascinated by the ceremonial aspects of military tradition. My niece, 7-year-old Abigail, had asked countless questions about my uniform during the family dinner the previous evening, examining each medal and insignia with solemn attention. "Did you get these for being brave, Aunt Katie?" she had asked, pointing to my service medals. "Some of them," I explained. "Others are for serving in particular places or completing specific missions." "I think you must be the bravest person in our whole family," she declared, with the absolute certainty of childhood. From across the table, I caught my father watching this interaction, a complex expression on his face, regret, mingled with genuine pride, and something else I had rarely seen there, respect. The changes in our family dynamic had not happened overnight. The weeks following the retirement dinner had been awkward, with tentative phone calls and carefully worded emails replacing the previous pattern of minimal contact punctuated by holiday obligations. My father, true to his word, had made visible efforts to understand my military career, asking questions about my responsibilities and leadership philosophy, without attempting to relate everything back to corporate parallels. My mother had stepped more fully into her own voice, no longer serving as a buffer between my father and his children, but as an equal participant in family discussions. It turned out that beneath her accommodating exterior, she harbored strong opinions and a keen insight into interpersonal dynamics that had gone largely untapped during my father's corporate reign. My brothers, too, had begun to relate to me differently, as a peer with unique expertise rather than a sister who had chosen an incomprehensible path. James had even consulted me on a leadership challenge he was facing at his firm, acknowledging that military command experience might offer perspectives unavailable in the financial sector. Now, as General Thompson pinned the third star to my uniform, and my family applauded from the audience, I felt a sense of integration that had been missing throughout my adult life. My professional accomplishments and my family identity were no longer segregated into separate compartments. They existed together, sometimes uncomfortably, but increasingly with mutual respect. After the ceremony, we gathered for photographs on the steps of the Pentagon. As the photographer arranged us in various configurations, my father leaned close and spoke quietly. "I am proud of you, Catherine, genuinely proud, not because of the rank or the recognition, but because of the leader you have become, through your own determination and ability. I was wrong about so many things, and I am grateful for the chance to see that clearly now." The words were simple, but profound in their honesty. I met his gaze directly. "Thank you, Dad. That means more than you might realize." Later, at the small reception following the ceremony, I observed my father in conversation with General Thompson and several other high-ranking officers. Rather than attempting to dominate the discussion or draw parallels to his own career, he was listening intently, asking thoughtful questions about military structure and leadership challenges. It was a small thing, perhaps, but indicative of a genuine effort to understand the world I had built for myself. My mother joined me as I watched this interaction. "He has been reading books on military history," she confided, and biographies of female military leaders. He would never admit it outright, but I think he is trying to understand your journey. That is unexpected, I acknowledged. People can change, Catherine, she said. Even stubborn corporate executives set in their ways for decades. Sometimes they just need a dramatic wake-up call. I smiled at that. Like having their public assumptions about their daughter shattered in front of all their colleagues. Exactly like that, Mom agreed with a small laugh. Though I would not recommend that particular method for most family conflicts. As the reception wound down, and family members prepared to depart for their respective homes, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past 3 months. The public revelation at my father's retirement dinner had been painful and awkward, but it had also broken through barriers that might never have fallen otherwise. Sometimes the most uncomfortable moments create space for necessary growth. My father approached as I was gathering my cover and briefcase. Your mother and I were thinking, he said with uncharacteristic hesitancy, that perhaps you might join us for dinner once a month when your duties allow. Nothing formal, just family time. James and Michael would join when they can. The invitation represented a significant shift in our family pattern, regular, intentional connection, rather than obligatory holiday gatherings. I would like that, I said, though my schedule can be unpredictable. We understand, he assured me. The invitation stands whenever you are available. As we walked together toward the parking area, I realized that the weight I had carried for years, the burden of being perpetually misunderstood and undervalued by my own family, had begun to lighten. It had not disappeared entirely. True healing would take time and consistent effort from all of us. But for the first time, I could envision a relationship with my father based on mutual respect, rather than constant disappointment. The lessons of these past months extended beyond my family situation. I had always prided myself on clear communication in my professional life, on stating expectations explicitly, and addressing conflicts directly. Yet, in my personal relationships, particularly with my family, I had allowed old patterns to persist unchallenged, had hidden significant aspects of my identity, rather than risking rejection or misunderstanding. True strength, I was learning, lay not just in commanding troops or devising strategic operations, but in standing authentically in all aspects of life, even when that authenticity made others uncomfortable or required them to reconsider long-held beliefs. The courage to be fully seen with all one's accomplishments and vulnerabilities was perhaps the most challenging form of bravery. As I said goodbye to my parents, accepting my mother's embrace and my father's now familiar handshake, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me in previous family encounters. We were not a perfect family, and we never would be, but we were learning to see each other clearly, to respect our differences, and to support each other's paths, even when those paths diverged from expectation. Safe travels, General, my father said, as we parted, using my rank, not mockingly as he might have once done, but with genuine respect. Thank you, I replied. I will see you next month for dinner. It was a simple exchange, unremarkable on its surface. Yet it represented a transformation that I had once thought impossible, my father acknowledging my identity on my own terms, and me willingly stepping back into family connection without abandoning my authentic self. As I drove back to my apartment that evening, I reflected on how often in life the most profound changes come not from grand gestures or carefully planned interventions, but from moments of truth that cannot be ignored or explained away. My father's public mockery and subsequent humiliation had been painful for all involved, yet it had created an opening for honesty that might never have existed otherwise. Sometimes the most valuable gift we can offer those we love is the courage to be exactly who we are, without diminishment or apology. In standing firmly in my truth that night at the retirement dinner, I had not only reclaimed my own dignity, but had offered my family the opportunity to know me, as I truly am, not the daughter they had imagined, but the woman and leader I had become. Have you ever had to stand in your truth with family members who misunderstood your path? How did you handle that difficult conversation? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that being authentically yourself is worth the temporary discomfort it might cause. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the most profound respect is earned not by meeting others' expectations, but by exceeding your own.